such a part of our culture, just drinking. I mean, it's such a major part of it. You grew up with it, it's all around you. It's what we do. So it's hard to break free from that when it takes you down.
And I kept it a secret because I didn't imagine my life without it, not even close to how could I mean, the thought of even not having it was not an option for me because everything I did surrounded it. So how could I even, like, you can't even see that as a possibility out of the corner of your eye.
Yeah.
So I clearly wasn't telling anyone, therefore it didn't get addressed.
Yep. And it's a choice. It's what we choose to do to cope and to get through life. It's a tool for a lot of people. And that's what makes it so hard to break. But I know it takes an enormous amount of coverage to share your story, and I so appreciate that. But you found your way out. You found recovery. Could you tell us, because our family members really want to know, how in your recovery journey did your family support you, or what worked, what didn't, what helped, what didn't? Is there anything you could share from your own personal journey? How
Oh,
your family
absolutely.
supported you, please?
Yeah, absolutely. In those last couple of years, my husband and I separated. So I was living with teenage children, and they were seeing him when they could, but mostly living with me. So the way I look at it today is there wasn't another adult in the house. So how they handled it was they didn't. I remember many moments where my children tried to confront me. They were 14, 16, 18. And one in particular, I remember they found in my closet a bunch of wine bottles, 7 or 8, and they lined them up on the kitchen table when I came home from doing something in the morning. And my 2 daughters were at the kitchen table. My son was within earshot in the other room, but didn't want to confront. Their personalities were showing. The girls looked like state police officers, and my son was terrified, but in the other room. And I remember hearing 2 things in my head when I saw that they were confronting me. I was saying, what's your plan? Kate, what's your plan here? Like, how are you doing this to these beautiful children? I mean, this is all that mattered to me, was sitting in front of me. And there was another voice that was like, that's so disrespectful that they would speak to their mother this way. It was the addiction and recovery. It was love and fear. It was the 2-sided coin, it was. And I truly remember wanting desperately, I could cry just thinking about it, to say, please help me. But it was almost as if there was a hand over my mouth. The words wouldn't come out because I could hear them. So I could bring myself back to that moment, as could they, in a minute, just thinking about it. And they held fast. And I said, because here's what I said, those are old. Almost like those aren't mine, when you're a kid and you get caught with a pack of cigarettes. And that's where my head was saying, Kate, seriously? And my youngest said, they weren't there last week. And so I ended up shaming them for speaking to me that way, and took off and went to my bedroom, and then just, wanted to pound my head against the wall. I just had such self-loathing, and drank. And so that's how it worked in my family. If they did try to confront me, if they did try to help me, my sister tried to help me, and I yelled at her. The words I use today are shredded her. She tried to talk to my older daughter, who was in her early 20s at the time, and it didn't go well. They were lost. Yeah.
Well,
What I think of it as is I was using alcohol to cope with my struggles, and they were using alcohol and my behavior to justify how hurt and angry and mad and crushed they were. And so I wanted connection, right? That's the opposite of the addiction. That's what I was looking for. They were looking for connection, and alcohol just divided us. And the alcoholism created disconnection because they were responding to my drinking, not to my problem. And none of us knew this at the time.
right.
They were responding to my behavior naturally, not to the problem.
We always think it's the substance,
Right.
don't we? Yes. Wow. You are very eloquent in describing that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that story for sure. So
Thank you.
that experience, a very painful journey, led you to the work you do now. Now, how long did it take you to recover?
In the end, the final straw for me, I don't know why or how, but I managed to get myself to the emergency room driving with a very high blood alcohol level, still in secret. And I remember it was my second try. And I remember telling them in detox, I have to go further away and for longer. I don't know where I got that, but I just felt like the same old wasn't going to work. And so I did do a 30-day, 12-step program, and I agreed. So here's where family came in. I agreed to go to a sober house very begrudgingly. My youngest daughter went to a meeting at the treatment center that I was at with my parents and my older daughter, but she came out of that meeting and she said, Mom, they said, she was 16, I think, 17. They said it takes 9 to 12 months for your brain to heal, and they don't think you should come home. And I said, where would I go? And she said, they want you to go to a sober house. She listened and she spoke to me in a very loving way and kind of begged me not to come home. And for some reason, I listened, because I got to tell you, I wasn't cheerful. And I agreed to a couple of weeks at a time. But to be honest, Karen, I never went back. I stayed in that area for a year and a half. I never left the community that I got sober in, well, for a year and a half. I mean, I merged my way back toward home, but I never lived with her again. She finished high school with her dad. And that is what saved my life. I don't know how I think how I listened and what why I took the advice is because it wasn't, no one tried to sell me on a year and a half at the beginning. You know, I listened and I surrendered. And was it a daily thing? Yeah. I mean, I had moments where I wanted to escape again, but the way I look at it is I was fully surrounded. I went to a meeting that had 20 or 25 commitments a month, which is them going to other meetings. I mean, I was just surrounded with dozens and dozens of people, and you don't get lost in that, or the chances of you getting lost or letting yourself get lost are a lot harder when you're with that many people.
It sounds like a total immersion in your recovery.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't imagine that what was an easy decision to make, but
Well, and no, and I didn't make it that's a key point. I didn't make it in the beginning
yeah,
for the long term,
sure.
right? I agreed to a couple months and I was really obnoxious about it. I
Mhm.
was, I stomping my feet, really frustrated, but I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure that was definitely the secret to the success for sure.
There's no question for me. Yeah. The other thing I started to do is I immediately started to work in the field, started to work with others, whether
Yeah.
it be sponsoring people early on and then taking jobs in the field.
That whole service element is huge
Mhm.
for sure. And so many people that are even part of the summit are people just serving in such amazing ways. And you can bring your perspective. You have the perspective that is so important. So I'd
Mhm.
love to learn more about your programs and how you serve.
Yeah, I mean, it really started, as I tell people often, it started by mistake, the tipping point recovery. So I'll give you the progression. Early on in recovery, I worked in a detox and a rehab. It was really important to me to give back. And I started to notice early on in that I had no experience in the field prior to that, not a clinician, but I was noticing the family. I was noticing someone in detox could leave against medical advice and tell their parents there were no beds for treatment when in fact there were. And I was witnessing that, right? And I remember thinking, that's really bad. I remember families dropping their loved one off at treatment, and then the person would sign a release of information to include the family member. And then they would pull the release when they decided to leave the treatment center. So the family would call desperate and the treatment center would say, we can't talk to you. I remember being in that job as a case manager, looking around like, is this really happening? Is this really how it's happening? Because my look at that was in my kitchen, my children were being lied to. What I now look at is by the disease, not their mom, by the illness or disorder of addiction.